McMullen Jody McDonald here on Birds 365, and it's time for us to get Delawarean. And when we do that, we head in with one of the Princes of Darkness. Now, when it's Groats, Mr. Delco Times, it's because of his attitude. When it's Martin Frank from the Delaware News Journal, it's because his room isn't as bright as ours. He doesn't have as good lighting. Martin, you look wide awake enough, though. They keep you busy yesterday covering the Birds?
Yeah, I was about getting ready to go to bed. And
I was in bed, Martin. I had to pop back out. Come on,
all of a sudden, hey, Darius Slay's coming back. So yeah, it was kind of an interesting night,
Yeah, I'm like, come on, shut it down. Do it in the morning. At least give us that. But the Eagles. Yeah, it was an interesting day. 180. I call it the Jordan Belfort. If you're a Wolf of Wall Street fan, I know you and I are Moneyball fans, so I assume you're a Wolf of Wall Street fan as well, Martin. But
yep.
The move as a whole, I was a little surprised. I mean, coming into free agency, I thought, well, the Eagles are probably going to lose Bradbury and move forward with Slay and try to find a replacement. Turned out we thought for at least a couple hours they were going to lose Slay, and obviously they re-signed Bradbury. Now they have them both back. How much does this shift your thought process about this defense and the move from Jonathan Gannon to Sean Desai?
Yeah, I mean, I think it shows like a lot of these guys want to run it back. I mean, yeah, Sean Desai is going to be a little bit different than what Jonathan Gannon was, but I think, the concepts will pretty much be the same, and it's something they're familiar with, and it worked out great for them last year, so I don't see why, they don't think it'll work out again this year, even with a different guy calling the defensive plays and Sean Desai. So, a guy like Bradbury, a guy like Slay, if they were to move on, I mean, you're talking about a new team with potentially a new system and everything like that. I mean, it doesn't always work out that well. And if you're a guy who's 32 years old like Slay, and you're getting a 1 or 2 year deal and it doesn't go well, that could be the end of your career. At least, if you come back to the Eagles, you kind of know the system, the guys, and, obviously it's a good team because they went to the Super Bowl last year. So, I mean, I think all that went into his thinking. Maybe, all that money that he thought he was going to get, A, wouldn't be out there, and B, even if it was, like, maybe it doesn't work out if he's in a new system with a new team and, they're not as good, support-wise around him and everything. So, I think that's why a lot of these guys decided to run it back one more year.
Well, if that's the case, and Darius Slay is glad to be back, and he's on his back nine of his career, but he's in a comfortable place. He's been here for 3 years. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson only one. Successful year, you can't argue that, how good he was, tied for the league lead in interception, even missing 5 games. How does he play his cards from here on in? John and I both agree. If the mega deal was going to be out there, he would have already signed it. What does the fact that we're now 3 days into free agency tell you about the interest in Chauncey Gardner-Johnson?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I mean, Javon Hargrave was pretty much gone as soon as, like, the free agency period started. I mean, he got that mega deal, and I think it's a good sign. I mean, the fact that CJ, Gardner-Johnson is still out there means that the Eagles still have a chance to bring him back. I mean, even with Slay and Bradbury coming back, I mean, I think Howie has a number in mind for Gardner-Johnson saying, look, we want to pay you, but this is as high as we can go. And I think Slay kind of figured into that. I mean, if Slay wasn't willing to, rework his contract, maybe take a lower amount and everything, then, I mean, they were ready to move on. So I think, CJ Gardner-Johnson's always kind of been a priority for the Eagles. It's just whether or not, if someone was going to blow him out of the water with a crazy offer, which so far hasn't come. I mean, maybe it still will, but I would think by now that it probably would have. And the fact that it hasn't seems to be a good sign that, the Eagles at least have a chance to bring him back.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, if the deal is there. Now, Orlando Brown took a couple days, and he got a big deal. So maybe, I guess there's a slight chance it's out there, but I don't think so. I don't think the market is what he was thought it was going to be. As you mentioned, Javon, if you get the splash offer, you take the splash offer and you're done with it. So I think it's a very positive sign. A couple other moves, though, Slay kind of overwhelmed everything, but Pletch is back. Miles is gone. No surprise, Miles. I think Miles got a nice little deal in Carolina. I'm surprised it went that high. And Pletch, I'll play devil's advocate because I think Fletcher should be back. Number one, there's a lot of people who don't think he should be back. I think he should be back. But I will say this. You mentioned Slay, 32. We know Jason Kelce. He can do whatever he wants, but he's 35. Brandon's 35. Pletch is 32. Eagles are bringing back some old players. At some point, there's going to be a tipping point. Hopefully, it doesn't happen at once. Does that concern you? And on the other hand, they bring in Rashad Penny, and everybody's really excited. Low risk, high reward deal. But that guy's never on the field, and you just gave up a 1,300-yard back with 11 touchdowns.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot to unpack with all that.
Yeah, sorry. Too much.
But no, that's okay. That's okay. We got time. So
yes, we do.
So I look at kind of Fletch, the same way with BG and Kelce. I mean, these guys have been Eagles for over a decade, probably among the all-time greatest Eagles players ever. And I'm actually kind of surprised Fletch came back. I thought he might take like a bigger contract somewhere else. But, the fact that he's coming back, it's like 1 year, $10 million. I mean, that's kind of a pay cut from last year. That seems about right. I mean, Brandon Graham, 1 year, $6 million. So, yeah, they're kind of running it back with older guys. But, like, these are also guys who weren't playing as much last year. I mean, it was kind of, the amount of plays was kind of designed around the fact that these guys aren't 27, 28 years old in the prime of their career. It's still kind of concerning at defensive tackle because, Fletch is going to be a key piece of that rotation right now because the only other guys on the roster are Jordan Davis, Milton Williams and Marlon Tui Peloto. They might have to, sign somebody else. They're probably going to have to draft somebody. So, Fletch might have to play more than he did last year. They might have to rely on him more than they did last year because they don't have, obviously, Javon Hargrave next to him. But, if Jordan Davis is a first-round draft pick, he's supposed to pick up that slack. So we'll find out pretty quickly if that's going to be the case. I mean, BG at defensive end, I think he played like 43% of the snaps last year. So, I mean, that's probably going to be about the same. I mean, they still have a pretty deep rotation there with Hassan Reddick and Josh Sweat, BG, and Derek Barnett's coming back. I know.
Oh, don't say that to Jody. You're going to get
cartwheels and all that. Cartwheels about that, but the guy's under contract, and as long as he doesn't commit like dumb penalties and everything, he's a rotational player. I mean, he's got a role.
Yeah, I agree with that. I didn't have a problem with them bringing him back as a rotational player, but then he got hurt. So,
yeah.
I think it's tough because he was a first-round pick here. Like, I think if he went to another team and they said, hey, this is a rotational player, you'd say, that's not bad. But because he was a first-round pick here, the expectations overwhelm it.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with that. I mean, Josh Sweat was a fourth-round pick, and, up in, his first couple of years, he didn't do a whole lot. And then all of a sudden, you're like, well, it's a fourth-round pick, not a big deal. And then he breaks out, and you're like, oh, wow, this is a great pick. So, there's a role for all these guys. And then getting back to the running back situation, with Penny and everything, yeah, he hasn't played more than 10 games in any season since his rookie year of 2017. He played 5 games last year, I believe. But he averaged 6.1 yards a carry last year, and he's averaged 5.7 yards per carry for his career. So, like, imagine how effective he could be with Jalen Hurts as a +1 guy, in the run game. All of a sudden, all those holes that were there for Miles Sanders, well, they should be there for Rashad Penny. So, as long as the guy can stay healthy, I mean, he could have a pretty big year. And, a 1-year prove-it deal, and he proves it, he might get another deal after that. I mean, maybe not with the Eagles because they don't pay for running backs, but I think it's a win-win for both him and the Eagles. I mean, he just has to stay healthy. I mean, that's obviously been a big problem. But if not, I mean, Boston Scott's back. They like Kenny Gainwell. He had a bigger role towards the end of the year and into the playoffs. Trey Sermon's still on the roster.
Yeah.
He's a guy who was a 3rd-round pick of the 49ers. And, they have depth. So, maybe they can run it back. And also, I still wouldn't be surprised if they draft somebody early, running back.
I'm with you. I think the lead back is not here yet. I think he's going to be bound in the draft in the middle rounds, and the Eagles don't even have a pick there yet, but they will get a pick there. And it's a very deep draft for running backs, I'm told.
Yeah.
Daniel Jeremiah said that. A couple other scouts told me that. So, you try to replicate the Chiefs and Isaiah Pacheco. And I don't think it has to be the 7th round. It could be 4th, 5th, 6th when they get when Howie deals down, which I think he will.
Yeah, I see that too. Sure.
Yeah, you guys somehow trying to justify Derek Barnett's a good contract. He's got dummy years till 2028. Oh, yeah, that was a great deal by Howie Roseman. That's his friggin' swing and a miss.
Don't criticize Howie today, man.
Oh, yeah, I am, because it's a bad deal. He doesn't get a pass. You and I just discussed this yesterday. You can point out Howie's very small
I'm joking, Jody.
mistakes. He doesn't make them often, but he doesn't get a free pass either. And Derek Barnett is it. That's all there is to it. If I don't care if Derek Barnett comes back and gets, let's pick a reasonable number, 6 sacks. Is that reasonable for a guy? So you called him a rotational player. Why do you want to set the over/under on tackles and/or sacks for Derek Barnett this year? What would be acceptable for a $5 million a year player?
I'm not a stat guy. I mean, is he going to be an effective rotational player? I mean, the torn ACL complicates things. First of all, we have to see if he's healthy. Number one. Will I think if he's healthy, do I think he's a good 4th defensive end in the NFL? Yeah, I do. I think, but the problem is he was supposed to be a star pass rusher. Now, if that's the expectation, if that's the scale, yeah, he stinks. But if the scale is readjusted and say, is he a good 4th defensive end in the NFL? I think he's a good 4th defensive end.
Right. Yeah, you and I disagree. It doesn't matter where he was drafted, who drafted what, just his salary and the amount of snaps that he gets, he will not live up to a $5 million a year contract. Just purely judging him on that, not expectation. You'd wash all those out just for what he was signed for at the age he was at last year. And I know it's kind of bad luck, but it is what it is. Don't take a snap. That's a fail. And this is going to be a fail again this year. But sorry, I just people try and make excuses for Derek Barnett and Howie Roseman. And the facts are the facts, and they just don't hold up. The fact is that Fletcher Cox is coming back. He's going to get paid. He's going to be part of that defensive rotation. When are we going to know about GJ? Both John and I thought that it could happen. It was a very busy Eagle day and had nothing to do with
going to happen yesterday.
Gardner-Johnson.
Yeah.
When do you think this does play itself out?
I mean, at this point, it might go into next week. I mean, maybe CJ is still kind of like seeing if anybody's going to make any kind of offer. I mean, basically, CJ knows what the Eagles are willing to go up to at the max. And he's probably just waiting to see if anybody else is going to blow that out of the water. And if they do, he'll go. And if not, he'll stay. But I mean, at some point he's going to make a decision. And probably if it's not like by tomorrow, then maybe like early next week. I mean, I don't think he's going to drag it out for months and months, because the longer he drags it out, the less his offer the less
yeah,
good
everybody's got a budget. Everybody's got a budget.
I mean,
and,
at some point the Eagles, say, well, look, you're not getting any offers. Here's our offer, take it or leave it, or we're going to move on with someone else.
Boy, I hope Chauncey's out. Remember when visits were a big thing in free agency? Remember when guys would actually go to the facility and it was all, you can't let them out of the building. Now it's the exact opposite. Either you sign right away or you got to take visits. And if you got to take visits, that's a bad sign. I hope CJ doesn't have to take visits because that is a very, very bad sign. But I don't think he will. I think he's going to sign for like under 10 million now. I'm under 10 million. I'm under 10 million. I think the Eagles might get him back at 8-9 million. And if not, Denver might sign him for 11. That's my high end. I'm just going out on a limb. But when you're not taken off the board quickly, as you mentioned, you don't get that splash deal, Martin. It's difficult. Speaking of splash deals, though, that's where I want to take you next. I don't know when it's coming, but it's coming. And that's not even the point. Jalen Hurts. But I want to ask you, when the Eagles, it seems like when the Eagles get somebody back, they always mention Jalen Hurts at some point, even defensive players. Jason Kelce mentioned it, obvious, he was on the Rich Eisen show. He thinks the Eagles are going to be a contender as long as Jalen Hurts is at quarterback. It's amazing how things have changed when it comes to Jalen Hurts. But how important is he to getting these guys back, do you think?
Oh, yeah, crucial. I mean, I don't think these guys are coming back if Jalen Hurts isn't the quarterback, to be honest with you. I mean, Kelce could have retired any time in the previous 2 years, and he didn't because of Hurts. I mean, if he doesn't believe in the quarterback, if he doesn't believe in their chances, to go far with him, then, the guy's made a ton of money. He doesn't need to keep playing. I mean, the fact that Brandon Graham mentioned it, I think when he decided to come back, Jalen Hurts, I mean, he gives them the best chance to win. You look at it as kind of like Mahomes with the Chiefs. I mean, you got to pay him. And the Chiefs did. And they found a way to keep like a lot of their core veterans because they believe in Mahomes and they believe Mahomes gives them the best chance to get to the Super Bowl. And, you kind of fill in the blanks with young guys, you draft well, you sign low cost guys. I mean, the Eagles are following the Kansas City Chiefs playbook on how to, keep winning with an expensive quarterback. And, the fact that, guys like BG and Kelce, and I would assume Fletcher Cox is in the same boat, are coming back. It's because of Jalen Hurts. And, they have the best chance to go out in their careers with another Super Bowl because of him. And I think that's a huge, huge reason why a lot of these guys are coming back because of Jalen Hurts. And he'll get paid, and the Eagles, Howie will find a way to make it all fit under the salary cap. I mean, the fact that, they want to sign Hurts to a deal this offseason helps them in that regard, because then you could space out the signing bonus beginning this year. When his salary cap hit is 4.8 million, you add like 10 or 15 million to that, and that still makes him incredibly affordable this year for a top quarterback in the NFL. So, I think it'll get done. It's just a question of when. And, I think a lot of these guys want to run it back with Hurts because he's the quarterback and he's going to be entrenched for many years to come.
All right, so if we're all confident that Jalen Hurts will not only be here but sign to a contract extension, I hope he plays all 17 games, because right now Ian Book is the backup quarterback and the guy who will be stepping in if Jalen Hurts misses a handful of games this year. You got confidence in Ian Book there, Martin Frank?
I think the backup quarterback is not yet on the roster.
Oh, come on. Come on, poor Ian Book. You gave Trey Sermon. Come on. The sermon from the book of Job. You got to give them all credit.
Yeah, exactly. You got to keep they'll keep him as a third quarterback. I don't see why they wouldn't, but it's the quarterback market is still kind of like sifting its way back down to earth and everything. there are a lot of guys out there. I mean, who knows? Maybe even Minshew comes back if no one's going to give him a chance to start.
Yeah,
You know,
Jacoby Brissett, that was a tough one for
yeah,
Nick, but he
I
was
know that
always
was.
going to, and
He
he's
got a
got a
lot of
chance
money
to
though.
start there. I mean, let's
Yeah, and
be
he got a
honest.
lot of money, and the Eagles weren't going to pay that for a backup quarterback. So,
No,
But
no.
that's the going rate now. You want a guy who started in the league before. Jarrett Stidham's getting $10 million per, Martin. If it's not going to be $10 million, it's going to be Ian Book.
possibly. I mean, how many? Chad Henne's been Mahomes' backup quarterback for how long? Up until he just retired. So, if you got to stay healthy.
And never forget the trade market with Howie Roseman. Never forget the trade market, because look what they did with Gardner Minshew. He might identify a quarterback that maybe is not they liked in the draft, is still on his rookie deal, and go that route. There's ways of doing it. And Howie proves that every year, and everybody seems to forget. Whether it's Bradbury in June, CJ August 30th, Linval Joseph in November. They traded for Gardner Minshew on a rookie deal. Who's to say they can't do it again to get a backup quarterback?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Howie calls like player acquisition season goes from March 15th all the way until the trade deadline at the end of October. So, yeah, I mean, he'll find a way. I mean, he's not going to spend a lot of money on a backup quarterback, but he'll find one somewhere.
It'll be interesting to see who that is. All right, we touched on it briefly. I just want to get a second opinion on Miles Sanders going to Carolina. I'm a Miles guy. I'm a fan. He had it's career year this year. His contract is fair market value. I don't think he got overpaid. I don't think he had to compromise tremendous amount to get the deal that he got from Carolina. And yeah, the Eagles brought in Rashad Penny, who's a big play guy who can't make big plays when he's sitting on the sidelines, not dressed. So there's an upside and a downside to both. You don't think there's any way that Rashad Penny's going to put up better numbers here in Philadelphia than Miles is down in Carolina, do you?
Better, probably not, but good enough. I mean, if he gets anywhere from 800 to 1,000 yards, I mean, I think anybody would be pretty happy with that.
800 to 1,000. Martin, he's never gotten that in 5 years in the league.
Well, he's never played more than 10 games. I think he had 700 one year.
Yeah, 700.
Is the food better here in Philadelphia? I always thought the food was good in Seattle. Keep you healthy, all that fish you eat up there.
Yeah.
What makes you think he's going to stay more healthy here than he's been for 5 years in Seattle?
Well, I mean, that's a gamble they're taking. I can't guarantee you that he will, but if he does, I mean, he should have a pretty good year. And I think, it's a low risk, high reward type of deal. And like we were saying earlier, if they draft a running back, I mean, they could always sprinkle him in. They can go with Gainwell, they can go with Boston Scott. It's going to be more. I could see it being more of a rotation this year, running back, than it was in the past few years with Miles Sanders. I mean, I'm a Miles Sanders fan as well. I mean, I thought he had a great year last year, and I think a lot of the reason why the Eagles were as good as they were is because, the other team couldn't focus on just trying to stop Jalen Hurts. And when they did, here's Miles Sanders running for 140 yards in a game and stuff like that. So there'll be plenty of opportunities for running backs to get carries. And I think a lot of the load will be split more, distributed more evenly than it was in the past couple of years with Miles Sanders. So, if he gets 800 to 1,000 yards and is healthy the entire season,
I'm going to hold you to that 800 to 1,000, Martin. That's the second time you've gotten there now.
All right,
I'll take the.
Well,
here's I'm
gonna help Martin out, because we were joking on Twitter. My second Moneyball reference of the day. I'm going to go Moneyball on you, Jody. So Miles had 1269, Kenny had 240, Boston had 217. So do the math of that. That's what you're trying to replace. You're not trying to replace the player. You're trying to replace that production.
Jason Giambi with Scott Hatterberg.
Yeah. Exactly.
Exactly.
Now, can they do it on the cheap? That to me is a larger question. And I'll bring in linebacker as well, Martin, because Miles is a good player, not a great player, but he's a good player. TJ's a good player, not a great player, but a good player. Kaiser, capable. I'm going to use the adjective. The Eagles are going to go cheap on both positions. Generally, I think their discipline is a trait that serves them well, but sometimes I think they're too disciplined, especially at positions they don't value. Agree with that or disagree with that?
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, like you mentioned with the amount of yards that they have to distribute among the running backs. I mean, yeah, it could not work out well, but you also have that wild card in Jalen Hurts. And it's the same kind of thing with linebackers. I mean, yeah, you want them to make the tackles. So like, if the defensive line is doing its job and putting pressure on the quarterback, you want the linebackers to be able to step up and make the play. And, TJ Edwards and Kaiser White did a good job with that last year. And Nakobe Dean and whoever else is playing the other linebacker spot, which, that still has to be determined. I mean, they're going to have to fill that role. And it's not a huge role, but it's an important one. And, if the Eagles can find a way to make it work, then, they won't have a big drop off from losing TJ Edwards and Kaiser White because, their linebacker system is it's kind of one where, you just want to fill the gaps. They don't have to like make all these crazy plays or anything like that. They just have to do their job. And
but Martin, let me throw in, because as a Delaware guy, the names. Paul Warlow, I'll start with.
Yeah.
Eric Wilson, LJ Bortz, Corey Nelson. I'm probably forgetting a few. They tried this a bunch of years where it did. Stephen Tulloch, remember they brought in Stephen, Jim Swartz guy. They've tried this a bunch.
There was a guy who retired too, right? What was his name?
Stephen was older. Stephen didn't retire.
It was like the COVID year, maybe.
I'm losing it.
I don't know who you're referring to, Mark.
But either way, people say, well, you can just replace TJ and Kaiser. Even Alex Singleton, who got a nice little deal in Denver when they moved on from him. They've missed a lot when they tried this route. They've missed more than they've hit at linebacker. The one time they went out and got a half decent free agent was probably Nigel Bradham, and that worked. That pretty much worked. And they had a good draft pick with Jordan Hicks, and that worked for a few years while he was healthy. But they've missed when they've tried the Kaiser White route more than they've hit. I don't think they've learned from that.
Yeah, I mean, when you look, I see what you're saying, obviously. I mean, obviously they're putting a lot of trust in Nakobe Dean because, they believe he's going to be the main guy. But, they just don't put a lot of trust, or they don't put a lot of emphasis on the linebackers. They just want them to be able to do a job. And, if they can, I mean, is it the end of the world? I mean, maybe you use a third, you use a safety more in that kind of role, like a hybrid type of safety, which, teams are doing more and more anyway. I mean, you put in your dime package. A lot of times you only have one linebacker on the field anyway. And our team's going to like run it down their throats when they do that. I mean, it's a possibility, but then, you got to have guys like Jordan Davis in the middle to stop the run. So, all this stuff that they're doing, I mean, there could be some risks involved. I mean, they just have to, they have to put a lot of trust in their young guys that they drafted to fill the roles. And if they can, then great. They should still be a good defense. And if not, then, they're going to have to like try something else next year, because, that's kind of how they're building the defense. I mean, they want to get after the pass rusher like they did last year, and they have a lot of those guys back, and they want to be able to cover, receivers in the secondary, and they have a lot of those guys back. So, you just have to, with everything else, you just have to fill it in, plug it in somehow, and make it work.
All right, last one for me, Martin. Eagles' best free agents still sitting out there, guys who were eligible for free agency, lost some, retained others, is CJGJ, and we'll see if today is the day that something actually gets done. But we almost never talk about Isaac Seumalo. And he's a favorite of the offensive line coach, always speaks highly of him. Know they've got Cam Jurgens, who they believe is ready to be plugged in and played. But Isaac has been a very important piece to the best offensive line in football for a couple of years. Does it have to be a one-year deal to bring Isaac back to keep flexibility? Is he going to get a multi-year deal? Another name that I haven't seen a lot of rumors attached to as to where he may be landing. What's going to happen with Isaac Seumalo?
I don't see him coming back. I mean, I think they really want Jurgens to play.
We didn't see Bradbury coming back either.
True, but I mean, I would be surprised if they brought him back, because I can't see. I mean, I can't see how they want to sit Jurgens for another year. I mean, he's
the heir apparent, Martin. He's the 16th heir apparent to Jason Kelce at last count. They keep going through these guys. Oh, Isaac was supposed to be
like two of theirs, like Landon Dickerson was supposed to be one, and he's like an all-pro left guard.
Yeah,
so that's out.
Yeah. Isaac was supposed to be the heir apparent.
The first,
exactly.
Isaac is going to retire before they actually need the heir apparent.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't see Isaac being back. I mean, he was a great right guard. He did a great job. He was a really good left guard before that, and I just don't think they're going to pay that kind of money when they have Jurgens. And, if you're trying to fit in everybody else, I mean, something's got to give, and I think Isaac's going to get a decent deal somewhere else. I mean, you look at, Chris Lidstrom, with the Falcons is getting like 21 million a year. He's a guard, and, I'm not saying Isaac's going to get nearly that amount, but I mean, he's going to get something, and I think it's going to be more than the Eagles are willing to pay.
Yeah,
when they have a guy like Jurgens ready to step in.
I thought Isaac would be a day one guy too, to be honest, but I think that injury hurt him. That was a really significant injury, so teams are probably concerned about his long-term viability. That's just a guess, because he played really well last year, really well.
Yeah, I mean, and like, Andre Dillard got $29 million for 3 years. I mean, you're not telling me that Isaac Seumalo he's going to get more than that, or
I don't think so. Left tackles are, that's a premium position, so that's a bargain at left tackle if he turns out to be a starter. Whereas guards, you mentioned Lindstrom, but he's top of the market.
Yeah.
Nate Davis, I thought he'd go to Chicago. That's where I thought Isaac would go, because they have so much money, and they signed Nate Davis instead. I think that was a bad sign, but we'll see. Hopefully Isaac can get a good deal. I don't think he'll be back, as Martin said. At M Frank NFL, you can follow him there on Twitter, DelawareOnline.com, the Delaware News Journal, one of the best in the business. Our old friend Martin Frank. What movie are you going to watch today, Martin?
Might watch Moneyball again.
All right.
Get some more lines.
You can't go wrong with Moneyball.
I keep thinking, like, they let Giambi go. They let Isringhausen go.
Well, it was funny because we're joking. The New York Yankees, of all teams, don't pay for Wi-Fi on their flights for their players, which harkened back to Moneyball when the players had to buy their own soda because the A's were so cheap.
Yeah.
The New York Yankees aren't buying Wi-Fi for their players. That's all.
But that's like always been the big flaw with Moneyball is like, you know, they mention all these like, you know, unheralded guys, but they still had a great pitching staff. Just like, you know,
they had
the
great
Eagles
players,
still have a great
players,
offense.
yeah.
You know,
they didn't win, by the way. They didn't win.
What's that?
They didn't win.
Yeah, but they got to the playoffs.
Oh, yeah.
You know, they won 103 games or something.
They had a very good team. They had a very good team. But it's funny, they ignored all their great players, all their great pitchers, as you mentioned. They talk about Scott Hatteberg in the movie. There were some more important players.
Yeah.
Miguel Tejada was on that team, wasn't he?
Yeah. Eric Chavez.
Yeah.
Great pitching staff, you know.
Yeah.
A lot of really good guys. So,
but it was all Scott Hatteberg.
We'll see if Howie's got any Moneyball moves up his sleeves here to get himself to backup quarterback. Martin, good stuff. Always a pleasure, bud. Appreciate it. We'll get you back on in a couple of weeks. Thanks much for jumping in today.
All right. Always a pleasure. Take it easy, guys.
Thanks, Martin.
Martin Frank from Delaware News Journal here with us on Birds 365. Coming up next hour, we're going to have D-Gun. That's right. For those of you who have been forlorn without the sports take this week, those guys got a little respite. The Mac and Mac guys on Birds 365 did a couple of weeks back. Sports take guys get a little bit of a break. But then, we can't. Eagles making all these massive moves. We don't hear from D-Gun. Hell no. We're going to hear from him coming up in about 25 minutes from now.